Okay, how'd I do?
It's a pretty good summary.
That was pretty good. We were downstairs before, and I was talking to some folks who are here, and I said, yeah, I'm going to talk to Vishal at Instagram. We're going to talk about Instagram shopping. And the reaction I got was, Instagram shopping? What are you talking about? You can shop on Instagram, and I don't think a lot of people necessarily know that, or if they know it, maybe they haven't even experienced it. Because up until now, it's primarily been an experiment for you guys, as far as I know. But it seems to be getting more serious. Can you walk us through, maybe to start, what shopping on Instagram even looks like?
Yeah, I think for a couple of years now, we've been playing with the idea of people come to Instagram to connect with friends and family, to connect with their interests, and they sometimes stumble upon products. That's maybe from brands they follow or from advertisers. And a couple years ago, we started to really notice the way they were hacking the platform, saying, hey, I'm coming across this great piece of media, brand, how do I find this product, what's the item number, how do I discover it? And it was a bunch of friction from that moment of discovery to being able to take that next step. So we introduced product tags in feed in early 2017 to remove some of that friction. We believe that shopping isn't necessarily about removing steps, but about making the steps easier to get from one to the other.
So explain what a product tag is for those who aren't familiar.
So think of a people tag in feed. When you tap on a piece of media, you can see the people that are tagged in the image. The same thing on products. When you come across a product, you tap, you get to see more information about the product. And we haven't really talked about the adoption of that. We've expanded from early 2017 to over 40 markets internationally. And today we're announcing that we have 90 million people using that product, engaging with those posts every single month.
So 90 million people are clicking on, and these are coming from brands, right?
That's right.
So a retailer says, hey, here's a beautiful photo, it belongs on Instagram, and we're going to tag the individual items in that photo, and you can click, and what happens then? You go, because you're not actually selling things on Instagram right now, is that correct?
That's right. So our focus has been on the discovery angle. So once you discover something, how do you then go from that moment of discovery to the next step? The next step could be learning more about the product, or you tap into the tag, you get a native product details page, information from the brand, maybe other posts that feature that product. You could also save it and come back to it later. One of the things that we found, one of the reasons we launched Save before we launched shopping tags was not all purchases happen in that moment of discovery. And in fact, even the journey of shopping isn't purely linear. It's more of a noodle. It's you discover something, maybe you save it, you come back to it later, maybe you go back to that product, you discover something entirely different.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the serendipity around finding products on Instagram is not necessarily purely linear, and we wanted to make sure we could support that.
So 90 million people sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. By Facebook standards, though, and Instagram standards, you have a billion users. So that's roughly 10%, 9% of your users are using this. At what phase do you kind of feel like you're in right now? I described it as most of what you've done has been experimental to this point. Do you think that's a fair characterization? Like, where are you guys in that spectrum?
I'd say we are getting started. So less of an experiment. We tend to, when we're making decisions on areas to invest in the product, be committed to not only the short term, but also the long term. And I think feed was a great place for us to get started. In the context of people, we need to make sure that we have both the two sides of the marketplace. You need people, you need businesses. So we've been ramping up on the business side. And feed has been this great place for these magazine shots, these beautiful images that then people can get inspired by. But what we've seen is that stories is another great avenue for brands to tell their story. It's going into the store as opposed to just looking at the window. It's the story behind the product. And brands have been using that really successfully since we launched Stories in August of 2016. So
to sell stuff.
Yeah, for inspiration, for the story behind the product or behind the brand. How do you look at the inside of the jacket, not just it on a body, or looking at it on multiple body types or in multiple colors. So brands have been doing that in stories, but we've only had that shopping functionality in feed.
So but you're adding it to stories. You're experimenting with stories.
So we were testing it in June in stories, and as of today, actually, we're going to be announcing that story availability for shopping stickers is for all businesses that have access to Instagram shopping, and it'll be available to all businesses and all consumers globally as of today.
So people can do the same. It's the same format, right, of the tag. How much? This is not just specific to shopping, but you brought up stories. That has been a massive product for you guys. Where are we in terms of time spent, right? So people are spending time in the feed. They're clearly spending time in stories if you're bringing shopping there as well. How do you think about those two? Like, are people actually spending more time in stories than in feed, or where are we with that?
We think of feed and stories as actually solving different jobs for consumers. We talk a lot about job theory. Clayton Christensen has this great book on kind of understanding how luck, where does luck actually come from and how do you compete with it? And actually, there isn't necessarily luck in product development, it's really understanding what is the consumer job you're trying to solve for. And feed, historically, maybe in 2010, 2011, when we were first on Instagram, was more about casual moments, and that's what people were sharing. But as the audiences grew, as more professional content creators came onto the platform, the mimicry and the pressure around sharing to feed increased. So what Stories did was actually introduced a new job into Instagram. So where feed had evolved into a highlights job, Stories really allowed us to be the moments in between those highlights. And that applies to people, it lets businesses tell a deeper story. And so I think these two things really need to be thought of together, in addition to sharing privately in direct messaging, as the different kinds of sharing, solving different kinds of jobs, and that's where we think Stories fits in.
Yeah, how's that work with shopping? Because what I use Stories for, to your point, are kind of the things that are maybe throwaway, right? If I'm doing this amazing trip, I might put a couple highlights into my feed. But if I'm just out with friends in the evening, I might do a couple stories posts, and it's kind of like I know they're going to disappear. It's a toss away. To your point, it's much lower threshold. So as a retailer, though, you don't necessarily want to imply that anything you're selling is lower threshold. So is there, I don't know, are you seeing differences in how people are kind of tagging products in Stories versus feed?
I think there's a wide variety. So there are certainly pieces of content that are really designed to be around 24 hours. It's a quick hit on something. At the same time, we have highlights in Instagram Stories, which is you can take some of your best stories and package them up and put them on your profile. So we see brands using them in a variety of ways, saying, this collection of media, these collections of stories actually make up a highlight, so let's highlight that on our profile.
And that lives kind of forever, if you will.
That's right.
Let's take another step back, big picture. You talked about kind of product discovery as being maybe a goal. I hear that a lot with Pinterest, for example. Where do you feel that you fit in to the broader kind of digital shopping landscape? I mean, if I want to buy furniture for my house, I kind of know there's a couple of websites I may go to. If I want to buy clothes, I know where to go for that. What am I going to Instagram to shop? Is that the vision?
I think this requires the same context we talked about earlier, which is the job I think we've been solving in shopping is that serendipitous job. It's the equivalent of walking down the street on the way to dinner and seeing an interesting product in the window and then walking in. So you didn't set out to shop, you just came across a product. And so that's, I think, what Feed and Stories really does well. I think there is a more intentional job in shopping, which is I actually want to shop. So shopping as a hobby, shopping as entertainment, shopping as a thing I'd like to do. Maybe it is something that picks me up on a bad day or something I'm excited to do for myself on a good day. And we think this window shopping job, where there's more intentionality, is really important. And people are, again, hacking Instagram to do that today, whether they're curating their graphs so that when they scroll through feed, a lot of it is shopping content, or moving from profile to profile and looking at those shops to shop, essentially. So the other thing that we're actually announcing today is a test around window shopping. And what we're going to be doing is putting a dedicated shopping channel in Explore for this window shopping job. So the idea is, where is a dedicated destination, a place to go on Instagram where I can shop? And it won't just be from the shops that I follow, but also the shops that are out there on Instagram that maybe I don't follow. And it's a great place to do discovery as well.
So you'll compile everyone who's basically selling anything on Instagram into one feed.
Yeah, so think of the 200 million people who go to Explore every single day and look at all the great content that exists on Instagram. How do we take a shopping lens to that? Take all the shopping content, whether it's feed posts or in the future stories posts, and make sure that that content is all in one place for someone who is in the mood to shop.
So I saw a report a couple weeks ago from Casey Newton at The Verge, one of Vox's other properties, that you guys are working on a standalone shopping app that sounds a lot like what you just described, a feed of things to buy. Are you working on a standalone shopping app?
I'm impressed we got 10 minutes into the conversation before you went to the room.
It was going to be the first question, but I figured I'd let it move a little further down.
I appreciate that. We really think about these different jobs. So there's that serendipitous job, which is in Feed and Stories. There's this window shopping job, which is that dedicated destination, and that's in Explore. So that's really what we're working on and what we're focused on.
So you're not building a standalone shopping app?
We have 90 million people using shopping in the main product. There's a ton to do in discovery. We think Explore is a really good opportunity.
Okay, so no on that. No yes, but no. Let's pretend you were building a standalone shopping app. You are, to your point, you've created a destination in Instagram to go and shop. Is there a reason that it would make sense for that to be its own app?
I think so in general, our product development really is focused on jobs. So we think the window shopping job, this intentional job, is really well suited for what people are already doing on Instagram today, which is to discover on Explore. So we have 90 million people using shopping overall, 200 million people a day going to Explore. We think the leverage, both from a use case perspective as well as where people are to do that in the product, and Explore is where we're going to do that.
Okay, because downloading a new app is a pain, right?
We have 1 billion monthly active users. Makes sense to
Makes
go where
sense
they are.
to not download a new app. I want to take one more, to go back a little bit to the window shopping idea that you talked about. I feel like that's been the conversation around commerce and social media for a while, right? There was buy buttons. I was going to scroll through my Facebook feed and come across something, and I was going to spontaneously buy it right there. That didn't really seem to work, this notion of impulse shopping in feed. Do you think that there is a legitimate business in kind of selling me something in the moment? Or is this an advertising play for you? Like, what is the business behind this for Instagram?
I think it goes into consumer intentionality. So I think our advertising products are trying to find people in the moment when they're ready to either make a purchase or they're considering something. That's where all the targeting optimization apply. I think on the organic side, when you're following a business or discovering things in the shopping world, we wanted to make sure that not only is the product experience allowing you to take that next step, it's not necessarily in your face. So there isn't a buy button in feed, it is opt-in to see those tags. It is a shopping sticker in stories, you need to opt in to tap there and learn more. At the same time, I don't think the steps beyond discovery are necessarily automatic either. So I think back to my point about not removing steps, I think these steps are important. Discovery, consideration, coming back, reconsideration. And so it's about removing friction between those steps. It's about shopping, not just buying. I think shopping is much more than just buying.
So is there a reason, right now I can't buy direct in Instagram. Is that something you'd like me to do at some point?
I think that's an interesting problem to solve. I think there are a bunch of ways where people can do that today. I think the discovery aspect of coming across a product in the serendipitous case or really focusing on a destination in the window shopping case is our differentiation, and that's where we're really focused, is on that discovery angle.
How do retailers feel? I imagine if I'm a retailer, that sounds great, right? If I'm a retailer, I can go to Instagram, I can promote my product. You're not actually selling it for me, so I'm still driving people back to my website. I guess where I'm getting hung up is like, what is the value to Instagram? I suppose maybe as a user I'm spending more time, or if I'm an advertiser, maybe I'd want to promote a post like that. Am I missing something though? I mean, like, where does the business element come in for you? Like, where do you make money in this process?
The business continues to be advertising, and we're committed to that. So that is how businesses can grow. That's how they can reach new customers. Certainly some of these shopping products can become ad products in the future. I think on where this matters and why we build it in the first place is, you mentioned earlier kind of how we organize our teams. Our mission is to bring people closer to the people and things that they love. And so it is on mission for us to be able to connect people to the things that they love. And so whether that's a business, whether that's a creator, whether that's a small independent business that they haven't yet discovered but is right around the corner. We have 25 million small businesses on Instagram, half of which don't list a website. So Instagram is their digital destination. And it is part of our strategy to connect those small businesses with as many people as they can possibly find.
What about like if that's indeed the case, right? If there's 12 million businesses that use Instagram as their website, is there any plan to give them a chance to list all their products, right? Like to create basically a storefront, if you will.
I think that's a lot of what the shopping features have been used for. And so we actually have a shop button on profile for businesses who are shopping enabled. It currently shows a list of all the product posts that they've made, and it's a filtered list of those. That really does become more of a destination for that brand, for that small retailer. At the same time, I think we look at not just what's going on in feed or in stories, but the entire ecosystem. So Instagram Direct, for example, is a place where people can go from a moment of inspiration to a conversation. We have 150 million consumers every single month having conversations with businesses in Direct. And we find that visual medium is a really great conversation starter, whether it's pre-purchase about personal guidance and learning more, or really about taking it to that next step, and that small business ecosystem really helps fund that.
Yeah, and I want to get to Direct in just a second, but I want to stick on the tags and kind of maybe what's been working thus far. So first of all, how many people are actually doing shopping posts right now? Is there like an application or something?
Yeah, so you can apply. It's open to anyone that has a product catalog that they can ingest. We have great partners like Shopify that allow us to import product catalogs from a bunch of brands. Or you can come in and bring that in yourself. But it is open to brands in that vertical across the different countries that we're open in.
And so what works? What do people actually want to buy on Instagram, and what don't they want to buy?
What's interesting is we get that question, and what works on Instagram shopping is what's always worked on Instagram, which is really great content. So this isn't different types of content. This isn't something new you suddenly start posting when you have access to these tags. This is taking the great product inspiration that you've always provided on your account as a business and being able to take consumers who want to learn more, give them the ability to actually do so. So it's less about a content shift and more of giving people the ability to go a step further.
But what kind of products though? Like, am I going to buy, am I going to buy a sofa on Instagram? Am I going to buy T-shirts? Like, I imagine there's some maybe type of purchase that maybe works better than others.
I think there's certainly verticals that are, so the ones that are by definition more visual in nature tend to work better. Actually, there's some great, furniture makers that are maybe even the smallest ones that get discovered on the platform and really find an audience. At the same time, I think there are things that do sort of lend themselves more to the visual medium, whether that's in the fashion or apparel state or in beauty as a vertical. So we are thinking about that from both a vertical perspective, but also that it doesn't need to be limited, that it can be more open, and that I think these 25 million small businesses, many of whom are retailers or merchants, really are trying to figure out how to connect with their audience.
I think there is, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's some stuff you are selling direct on Instagram, like tickets maybe to events or something like that. Can you walk me through the difference between selling kind of a digital good versus a physical good? Is there a benefit to, is there a reason maybe I can buy a movie ticket directly through Instagram, but I can't buy a lamp for my living room?
Yeah, I think this goes down to sort of different kinds of verticals that we're thinking about. So the shopping vertical is something that we're kind of looking at both from a discovery and consideration perspective. What you're talking about is some of the work we're doing with third parties around going from the business profile to that next place of getting business done. So we're doing some experiments. This is early days with things like ticket purchasing or reservations at restaurants, and that's really applying to get people out to a physical location. So it's more in that local space. So we're thinking about it in different ways depending on the vertical, but it's really just a test, and we haven't rolled that out more broadly.
Okay. Direct, that's what I want to ask you about. Twitter is another company that I write a lot about, and over the years they've really they've gone in and out of wanting to kind of do customer service. This notion of if you have an issue, Twitter is the best place to probably complain about it, but also to get in touch with that business. Do you have desire to kind of turn the direct messaging feature of Instagram into any kind of customer service element? And do you do that already?
I think that happens today, mostly though when there's already a thread going between a person and a business. I think where we're really focused and where we think there's a bunch of advantage and leverage for us is to do it earlier in the purchase journey. So it's not about service after you've purchased something, but after that moment of inspiration, how do you then go from that moment of inspiration to taking a next step? And we think a lot, in the same way that I think a lot of, we've seen certainly a lot of personal conversations start on direct, not through an individual text message, but through a reshare from feed or something that you found in stories that you want to share with a friend. It then converts into a place to have a conversation, whether to share more things or to have a conversation. We think a thread between a person and a business is very much that private space between a person and a business, and it could be started by a piece of visual inspiration, but then certainly can kind of go from there. So that's where we're thinking about what the role of that thread is for both the small business as well for the individual.
Facebook and Instagram have both gotten big in their own ways. Facebook is obviously much bigger, but it has always seemed to be, especially in the last year with all of the drama that's gone around with Facebook, it's been about kind of like bringing it back to connecting with friends and family, right? That was the whole thing, friends and family, friends and family. You are working on connecting all of us to not friends and family, but to businesses. I'm curious what you see as, are people on Instagram open to that? Is there a desire to say, I want to have a conversation with a retailer on your platform, or does it feel intrusive?
I think it's very much a part of the platform, and it has been since the beginning, since 2010 when Instagram got started, and there were businesses from the beginning. I think there are a couple of things that work in our advantage. One is it's been a part of the ecosystem from the beginning. So there's never a time when businesses came on board. They've sort of always been there. The reason they've always been there is that a business and a person on Instagram are the same thing. They're an account. Now, there's a way to recognize that an account is a business profile, and when you go there, you can see they're a business, but they can participate in the community in the same way that a person can. And because people are open to connecting with businesses, and businesses have always been a part of the community, that's just how the ecosystem has evolved. And so if you think about the Instagram feed or even in stories, that's all about content from people you've followed. whether that is the post that they've made or the stories that they've posted. It's not about sort of things being recirculated around the ecosystem. So we don't have reshares in feed.
Right.
We don't have content that is kind of unconnected from you in feed. It's all about the things you've elected to follow. And you've always been, as an individual, connecting with both people and your interests.
So it's that idea of messaging with a brand is I guess, it's not a turnoff, it sounds like. People are doing that.
People are doing it. I mean, I know Away as a brand is here at this conference, and I've been an early customer of theirs, and I've tagged them in stories when I'm traveling because I'm just excited to share how much I love that product. And they'll respond to me in direct. And when I had an early bag that didn't have a battery that popped out, and I wanted to get a replacement, I reached out on direct, and we were able to get that figured out. So it's just been a part of the ecosystem.
Raise for the social media manager at Away coming. A couple more minutes, and then we're going to open it up to questions here. Hopefully you all have a lot of good questions for Vishal. This has gone quick. I mentioned that Facebook and Instagram have gotten very big. I personally think that Facebook, the app, has gotten incredibly cluttered. There's a lot that you can do within Facebook. Instagram, by comparison, has been relatively simple over the years, right? Which is a compliment. I think that adding things like shopping can sometimes scare people because they say, oh no, it's getting too cluttered, or they're adding too many features, taking away. How do you add something like a shopping element without kind of trampling on all over the simplicity that you guys have done so well?
One of our values, in fact our core value, is to do the simple things first. And when I say that to people, they assume I mean simplistic. But actually, simple is much harder than simplistic. Simple is very complicated. It's about understanding all the things that you want to do and then removing until you can land on the simplest possible solution. So take shopping in feed, for example. If we had introduced that as a buy button in feed, or it felt very different than the way you come across people tags in feed, you might have really reacted in a way that this felt different to you in the product. Or similarly, let's take our Explore channel that we're talking about today in shopping. We actually thought about whether that Explore channel should be a 2-wide grid as opposed to a 3-wide grid, because you've opted into looking at shopping. We should show you larger thumbnails.
Because it's hard to see.
Because they're small.
A little hard, yeah, they're hard to see.
And you have intent. You're coming in there specifically to shop. So that might be the optimal decision for that individual product, but it might be the wrong decision for Instagram, the system, because we're introducing a new design construct that you as an individual maybe don't think explicitly about, but it adds the complexity, the feeling of complexity in the app.
Because then that section looks different than other
Exactly.
sections.
So the way we go about adding things without adding complexity is to make sure A, it fits into the design system, B, that we're not just kind of taping it on into one place. I think Stories is a good example of that. When Stories came in, it was integrated into the system. It was in profile, it was in feed, it was in search. It wasn't just a thing that we added on. And so we think about any new thing, whether it's shopping, whether it's stories, how it fits in the overall system, how we make sure the system stays simple, and if we don't feel it's simple, maybe we'll make a suboptimal decision for that product, but the right decision for Instagram overall.
Yeah. I have one last question, then we're going to get to the audience. There's obviously a lot of, I don't know if fraud is the right word, but when you're buying stuff online, you obviously, as a purchaser, you need to be able to trust the retailer that they're A, legit, and B, they're going to send you what you ordered and it's going to be on time and all that stuff. As the facilitator of these transactions, and I know I'm not necessarily, we've already talked about this, buying it on Instagram, but how much responsibility do you feel to kind of make sure that people are engaging with legitimate brands and not just brands that are maybe cropping up, on Instagram to do shady stuff?
We take that very seriously. It's one of the reasons that as we were rolling out shopping tags in feed, we were doing it in a more measured way, because we wanted to ensure that integrity was part of that approval process, both at the brand level as well as at the individual product level. And so it's why we've taken the time to roll that out appropriately. And obviously, as you said, we're facilitating. We're not exactly kind of hosting those transactions, but it still reflects on the brand when people are coming across something, and even if they're purchasing it somewhere else, they think that they really found that on Instagram and hold us responsible. And so we take that responsibility very seriously.
And how does that actually play out? What happens if you find a brand that is reselling Amazon products or something like that?
So we have a series of commerce policies that we abide by, and there's a series of enforcements that we do, whether that's at the product level or even at the individual kind of feature level, or even access to shopping overall. So we take that entire feedback loop incredibly seriously.
Boot them off if they're bad. Great. I see one first question. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, Andrew Essex. So you've talked a lot about pivoting to commerce. I wonder if Instagram is thinking about physical space and actual experiences in the real world.
So the question on experience, I think, is really important. It's one of the reasons we think stories is such a interesting medium for the commerce space. We talk a lot about how in many sites, including Instagrams today, when you go past that moment of discovery and then you go to that product details page, it's kind of where the fun of shopping goes to die, right? There's a product details page with a flat white background and a bunch of product shots, maybe a wall of text. So how do you actually make the experience of discovery more interesting, more like going into a physical store? That's not areas that we're focused on, but we can certainly connect the people who are all over the world that are interested in that brand, interested in that product, bring them a more experiential shopping journey, not just one that's flat images. So I think stories, immersive formats like that, longer form content like we're seeing in IGTV, I think are going to play a really interesting role in bringing more experiential shopping into the palm of your hands, even if you can't physically be in the store.
Great. Right here in the front.
Hi, how are you? I'm Gabriella Anastasia. I'm with Tudor Watches. I manage communications. My question is about what are your key learnings on the luxury industry and how to follow the, let's say, the milestones in a person's life to give them what they need at the time that they need it. And an example of this would be, I recently bought a house and was hoping I could trick Instagram into finding brands that would try to earn my business in terms of the bigger ticket items. And I was a little disappointed that I couldn't find, I wasn't getting as many ads that I would have liked to have seen for couches and for lighting and things like that. So do you have any plans to kind of create some kind of algorithm that follows a person through the bigger spending moments of their life?
A priority for us is relevance in advertising and a lot of the business content. A lot of times I'll tell people that we have more than 2 million active advertisers on Instagram, and they think that just means more ads. Actually, that just means better ads. Because the more advertisers on the platform, the more ads for any individual auction, the better job hopefully we can do of selecting the right ad for you at that moment in time. At the same time, ads in and of itself require signal and knowing what maybe those moments are or the milestones that you're talking about. So some of those are things that you're actively doing on the platform by following brands, engaging with them. Some are things that are happening kind of in third-party locations. So the goal is to try to continue to get better at understanding signals, but continuing to grow the number of advertisers on the platform so that we can match that right moment at the right time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And you, I know I keep asking about how you guys are going to make money from this, and I get the advertising thing. Can I promote a product post right now?
Not right now.
Okay.
And so we're looking at that as a future opportunity as we think about when people get really comfortable with these shopping posts, how they can be promoted. We do offer a range of advertising solutions for retailers, for brands that don't use that specific formats, but kind of use the general media format that we have in feed and in stories. We're thinking about as these products become more common, how does it make sense for them to show up not just for the brands that you follow, but for even the ones that you don't?
Is there any reason that you would not want to take a cut of a sale, especially something big, right? Like if you're buying a new house and maybe you're buying a sofa for a couple $1,000s. I mean, it would make sense if you're the one facilitating that whole thing that maybe you would take a small fraction of that. What's the downside of that?
I think for us, it's just making sure that we're focused on our business. And our business is advertising. We want to ensure that as retailers come on the platform, they're using these kinds of tools, they are free to use them and grow with us as much as they possibly can. And if they want to grow even faster, then we have advertising products for them.
Okay. Last question right here in the front.
Hi, Chris with Google. Can you give an example of a more traditional big box or department store who's doing a great job with shopping on Instagram, and why?
I think Nike's doing a really great job. I'll actually give you two examples. So one is Nike, who've always kind of been thinking about not just their distribution channels, but also the story that they want to tell. And their recent campaigns have certainly been emblematic of that. I think it's always been the brands who understood the story they're trying to tell, not just the products they're trying to sell, that are doing great on platforms like Instagram. At the same time, we have what Burberry did this week in terms of dropping their new line with a 24-hour exclusive, because the drop does also work on the platform. So I think it's about taking what these medium does offer, which is access to 1 billion people around the world every single month, and the storytelling and the visual nature that if you do those things well, I think these big brands have found success, maybe in a different way than they would have historically found.
Sorry, and I said that was last question, but I lied because I have one more. You run IGTV as well, which is, I guess, long-form vertical video. what is the plan for commerce and IGTV? Are we going to start seeing like infomercials there, or is it as simple as video ads that you click to go, shop? Like, what is there an avenue for people to actually sell stuff through IGTV?
To be honest, we don't know yet. I think one of the things with stories that we're starting to learn, and is true in IGTV, is shooting for vertical is different. You can't just take a horizontal piece of media and crop it and expect it to work. And so we've seen that in stories. We're continuing to see that with the adoption in IGTV, is what really works in this format. How do we then take that from just a learning into true scale? And I think that's what shopping will eventually be, hopefully, for us, but no specific things to talk about right now.
Okay. Vishal, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Great to be here. Thanks, sir.
Thanks, man.